Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That's right, we're ranking Reagan. Reagan is a 2024 American biographical drama film based on Paul Kengor's 2006 book, The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism. Now, when I go to watch a movie in the theater, I go every Tuesday and I try to pick the most popular movie so I can do a review on it. I determine that by looking through Friday and Sunday what the box office sales were. And quite honestly, I thought I was going to watch Blink Twice. And then when I checked Monday, Reagan was beating Blink Twice. And I hadn't heard about Reagan. I hadn't seen a trailer, nothing. So that was really surprising to me. I now know why that's the case. It's because every single person above the age of 60 that is a Republican Christian must be like telling all of their freaking retirement home friends to go watch it. Because when I went to go see it, my girlfriend and I were probably the only people under the age of like 50 years old watching this movie. And it's god awful. So let's talk about the 10 essential aspects of a movie and why this movie sucks. First is plot. Does the movie follow a comprehensive story arc and is plausible within the world that has been created? Alright, the plot of this movie. It is so just poorly executed. First off, the story is told by a retired KGB agent who was like the intel guy and needed to know all about Reagan. And I just thought that was a very weird take. The perspective of a Russian could have been interesting. However, the perspective is he just like idolizes him. He thinks he's like, he's just like, he calls him the Crusader, and he talks about how like good of a guy he was and all this stuff about how awesome he is and how he just like saved the world and he knew that he was going to be the one that took communism down and all this stuff. And I just thought it was weird for a Russian to talk that way. I just do not think a Russian who came from the 80s would talk about Ronald Reagan in that way. Maybe he would. To be fair, in some context, I knew nothing about Reagan. And that's actually why I was somewhat excited to watch this movie, because I just knew absolutely nothing about his life, about his presidency. And that's the only thing I knew was that he used to be an actor. And the only reason I knew that was because of Back to the Future. Like, I knew nothing about him, so I was kind of excited. So maybe a Russian would talk that way. I don't know. Maybe there's a historical context there that would say he does. But to be fair, that just means the context of this movie is bad. It didn't inform me enough. And that's another problem I have with this movie is from topic to topic, there's not enough context. There's not enough information to keep track of what in the world is going on. There are a lot of things that are talked about in this movie, a lot of situations that occur, and there's no context. There's periods of time where I have no idea how long it has been since the last scene and this scene. And they don't tell you whether there's nothing to indicate whether the last situation is done. Like the problem with communism. Is that situation done? You don't know. You just move on to the next thing. And it was just weird. It didn't work. And it probably would help if you had some context, if you knew about American history more than I did in that period of time politically. But I just don't. And I feel like that's a huge fall to this movie. And that's why all of the 60-year-olds love this movie. Because they all know. And so it's just like a flashback to them, to maybe the good old days or whatever. But to me, I just didn't know, and it didn't do enough to inform me. So the plot was just so poorly executed. Second is attraction. Does the movie have an interesting premise with a high entertainment value? The story of Reagan, I feel, is actually interesting. I was interested to go to this movie because I knew nothing other than the fact that he used to be an actor. And the thought of just going from to an actor to being the president of the United States, that's interesting. I want to know, how in the world does that happen? How did that occur? What caused you to go from doing that to that? But they handle it so terribly. The movie is so boring. And I don't think it's because the story is boring. It's just the way they chose to display his story was just not interesting enough. I feel they covered way too many topics, and they should have just honed in on a couple of them, a couple very interesting pivoting points of Reagan's life, and throwing some emotion in there. Instead, this movie was like a textbook come to life for me. Like, it was, you know how boring reading a school history textbook is? That's how this movie was. It was just like fact after fact after fact, and it's so incredibly uninteresting. Third is theme. What message or truth is a movie trying to convey? I don't really know if there was a theme to this movie. I was so bored I couldn't figure it out. Fourth is dialogue. Is there a real feel to the conversations? The dialogue in this movie I actually don't think is that bad. Now, it's a hard thing to separate sometimes between dialogue and acting, but if I do my best, I do feel the dialogue was fine. Other than not providing enough context to the viewer, I didn't feel people said things that were just, it was supposed to be serious and ended up being funny. I don't think that was the dialogue's fault. It was fine for the most part. Fifth is acting. Are the characters convincing? Now, this is where the movie gets bad. Okay, I feel the dialogue was okay, but sometimes the delivery is just not good, and it's funny. Dennis Quaid, who plays Ronald Reagan. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about Ronald Reagan to know whether he did a good job being Ronald Reagan, but I would say for the most part in this movie, he's just so bland, and that could have been Ronald Reagan as a person, but his emotional level in this movie is so low. The range is so low. He plays a very monotone guy with some influxes in anger or happiness, but for the most part he's just kind of boring and monotone. And I don't know if that's Dennis Quaid's fault or if he's actually playing a good Ronald Reagan and that's just actually good acting. He was just kind of a boring person. I don't know. But Penelope Ann Miller, who plays Nancy Reagan, she's god-awful in this film. She's so bad. I mean, she's like comedy gold in this movie. This movie is so serious. I mean, most of this movie is just serious. And there's moments where it's funny. But the moments that she's in, they're not funny. They're not supposed to be funny, but they are. I mean, she just delivers lines so poorly that it just makes you laugh. It's really bad, and it does not help the rest of the acting in this movie. 6 is cinematography. Is there a creative use of lighting, setting, and wardrobe to convey emotion? Okay, putting emotion to the side, the visuals of this movie, not good. It seems they made the movie too big for the budget that they had, because there's so many green screen moments in this movie that, gosh, they just look bad. They did not look good. It looks something that would come out of a college. I could probably make similar scenes in this movie. They're not good, and the people's faces look weird. They put a lot of filters in this movie, and it just makes it look weird, and it just has this feeling about it that almost makes it feel like it's not real, and it takes you out of the movie so many times, and it's just not good. It does not complement the movie. They should have just honed in on a couple topics and then put more money into having better scenes rather than just having a million scenes where they don't look good. As far as emotion goes, this movie was too freaking boring for me to feel any emotion other than laughing. The acting's bad at some points and it just makes you laugh. And then otherwise, I'm just so boring and confused that I really can't feel anything. So the cinematography in this movie, it's not good. 7th is editing, and this is all about the pace of the movie. The movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. It's too long. It's so long, but it's long because it sucks. You know what I mean? Like when you're watching a bad movie, you just don't even want it to be 30 minutes. So this movie is just way too long. I think they should have cut it down, because it didn't seem like they had a great budget. So they should have just cut it down to an hour and 45. They had complete scenes. All the scenes of him as a child, they could go, dude. They did nothing. And there's some extra scenes. There's a million extra scenes in this movie that you'll watch it and be like, what was the point of that? What was the point of that scene at all? So they definitely could have cut this movie short, and it probably would have made it much better. 8th is soundtrack. I don't know. I was too bored to even care about what music was playing. 9th is directing. Now, I feel the director is in charge of the previous 8 aspects, He's the one that's got to put a stamp of approval on all these things and put them together and make a good movie. Now the director, Sean McNamara. Okay, this dude, this is his 28th freaking movie. So you're going to have to bear with me for this list, okay? Or I guess you could just skip a little bit farther ahead to miss. But the previous movies that he's directed is Hollywood Chaos, Galgameth, Casper, A Spirited Beginning, Casper Meets Wendy, Three Ninjas, High Noon at Mega Mountain, Punks, Treehouse Hostage, Race to Space, the Even Stevens movie, Raise Your Voice, The Cutting Edge, Going for the Gold, Bratz, The Sweet Life movie, Soul Surfer, Robo Sapien Rebooted, Space Warriors, Field of Lost Shoes, Spare Parts, Aliens Ate My Homework, The Miracle Season, Mighty Oak, we're almost there, guys, Aliens Stole My Body, Cats and Dogs 3, Paws White, Sister Swap, A Hometown Holiday, Sister Swap, Christmas in the City, The King's Daughter, On a Wing and Prayer, and finally, Reagan. Dude, this guy has directed 27 movies, which is so many movies, and I've heard of one. Like, all I've heard of is Soul Surfer. Like, as a kid, I heard about that movie. I never even watched it. All the other ones, I've never heard of these movies. And based on the titles and some of the posters I saw, I feel most of them are probably kids' movies. But they're not even good kids' movies, because when he made them, I was a kid. And I don't even know any of them. So, it blows my mind that this dude has gotten that many directing jobs. I don't know who he is smooching up behind the scenes to be being paid to be a director and making these movies. But please stop. For the love of God, stop making movies. They're not good. Stop flooding the market with just these god-awful movies for no reason. This movie is not good, and the reasons it's not good is directorial choices. So please, Sean, stop making movies. 10th is Time. Does it stand the test of time? No. This movie's not gonna stand the test of time. Usually movies, okay, sometimes movies are so bad that they're funny, and they actually will stand the test of time because they're just a good laugh because of how bad they are. This movie doesn't do that come around where it's so bad it's good. It's just bad. It's just bad on so many levels, and it's so unentertaining. I will never watch this movie again, and I'm pretty sure anyone under the age of 60 will never watch this movie, ever. Now for the ratings. Rotten Tomatoes critics gives it a 21. Rotten Tomatoes audience gives it a 98, which is crazy. And then even IMDb gives it a 65. Every old person must have figured out how to use their computer and logged right into Rotten Tomatoes. I wonder how many Rotten Tomatoes accounts were created just to review Reagan. 98 is it's so high. It is way too high. It's terrible. There's no way it's a 98. 65 is high for me. Like 70 is a mid movie. This movie's not even close to mid. I don't know. People, they must have hopped right from that Rotten Tomatoes on the IMDb, made a new account, and boom, hit another positive review. I don't know. 21, now we're getting somewhere. Okay, we're getting somewhere. 21 seems actually kind of low because, I don't know, I just feel there are definitely some terrible, terrible movies out there that have zero redeeming qualities. This one has, there's something in there to redeem it. It's not god awful, it's just bad. So I would probably put it in like the 30s, but not the 20s. But 20s is close. It for sure ain't no 98. Now for the rankings. For the year of 2024 on the entertainment side, out of 13 total movies, it is going 13th, okay? It is below Frogman. I can't believe I get to say that this early, but it is below Frogman. Frogman, okay, it is boring, alright? Frogman is boring for the most part, but the last 10 to 15 minutes, that's the real redeeming quality. It gets kind of exciting, and I'm not gonna lie, like frogs that are basically wizards with telekinesis and are giant and have little frog babies with humans, kind of cool, alright? Kind of an interesting concept. The only problem is it's only in the last 10 minutes of the movie. Reagan, it's just boring throughout the entire movie, and you make me sit there and watch it for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Like, I'm bored for over 2 hours. It's going below Frogman. I would much rather watch Frogman than Reagan again. Cinematically, out of 13, it's going freaking 13th, dude. It's below Frogman. Frogman actually, as far as films go, it's not that bad. Other than being boring, it's just low budget. There's just not a lot of money in there. So it was kind of hard for them to make it as entertaining or represent film as nicely as it could. Movies with a higher budget can do that immediately, just based off visuals. But otherwise, the faults of the movie aren't really that bad than it just being boring. Reagan, it's got so many faults, and then visually, it's not even redeeming. It just looks bad. And then the acting's terrible, and the story's boring. So it just doesn't represent film that well because it's a bad movie. Frogman's just a cheap movie, and there is a difference, okay? For the decade of the 2020s, dude, out of 14, it's 14th on both sides. This is the easiest rankings I've ever done. It's going to stay there below Frogman. For all time, out of 20 movies, it's the worst one. It's staying down there at that 20th, just below Frogman. It's just not good. It's the worst movie I've ranked so far, and it's quite honestly probably one of the worst movies I've seen in a while, just because it just got so many problems. It's so boring. Alright, if you're over the age of 60, I'm sorry. I know you probably love this movie, but everybody who didn't live, wasn't benefiting off the Reagan administration, it's a boring movie, okay? And that's all I've got to say about Reagan. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see other movies that I'm going to rank, hopefully better than Reagan. I imagine they probably will be. Maybe along the line I will discover a movie that is worse. If you think you have one, please make sure you comment. Comment if you've seen this. I doubt you've seen it, but if you did, do you think it is as bad as I think it is? Alright, I will see you guys next time. This is all I've got. I'm Mr. Majoritarian. Stay classy, San Diego.